You may wish to turn your cameras off during the first part of this presentation, as we are now recording to share to our YouTube channel. But when we get to the questions and answer session at the end, please do join us then. So welcome again to the CAGNE online event. I am Sally Pavey, and I'm chair of CAGNE, and we are Communities Against Gatwick Noise Emissions, and we are the umbrella group for Sussex, Surrey and Kent, covering aviation and environment. This presentation is going back to basics. It will not cover everything, and if we receive requests, we will do additional events to cover the more complex side of aviation, but this is going back to basics. So apologies if you know some of this already, but it's important to get the foundations right. And there's Gatwick push ahead with modernisation of airspace and with the rebuilding of the emergency runway as a second runway. It's really important that you understand the basics. We are recording this, so you may wish to turn off your camera just because we are recording it for our YouTube channel, this first part. The second part, for the questions and answers, please do turn your cameras on. It'll be lovely to see you all. You can join our mailing list to keep updated with changes, and you can do that at cagnegatwick@gmail.com. So welcome. Okay, from small flying club to Gatwick today. Gatwick started life in 1930 as a small flying club. It was exclusively for flying enthusiasts. In 1958, New Gatwick was opened by the Queen. In 1963, the Ministry for Aviation transferred all regular charter flights from Heathrow to Gatwick. And in 1964, Gatwick extended the single main runway to the length it is today. Pre-COVID, Gatwick had roughly 56 airlines flying to 228 destinations, carrying over 46 million passengers. 89% is to European travel. Now, this map shows you the current airspace around Gatwick and at Gatwick. Gatwick Airport is part of one of the busiest airspaces in the southeast. It sits under Heathrow, and much of its airspace is dictated by this larger airport. It also affected by airspace above 7,000 feet from other airports, as shown here. This is all part of the London airspace. Much of aviation speak is full of abbreviation and complex procedures, but even the bodies that seek to deal with airspace and with airports are abbreviations. So I'm just going to give you a few examples here. So Gatwick Airport Consultative Committee is GATCOM. This is a statutory body that a lot of elected members sit on. Noise Track and Monitoring Advisory is NATMAG. The Noise Management Board, this is a community forum, is the NMB. Noise Executive Board, Noise Community Forum, and obviously Section 106 is the funding that local authorities receive from Gatwick. Industry groups include FLOPSI, Sustainable Aviation, even the Department for Transport is the DFT, and they have the Department of Transport Aircraft Noise Management Advisory Committee, and MAC. So as you can see, these are all sent to blind us a little bit to actually what aviation is all about. And that's why so many people find it a minefield when it comes to these consultations. So this map here gives you an idea of levels over the land, mostly arrivals, but this gives you an idea of the height of aircraft have to be within these sections. Now, NATS, which is Air Traffic Management, control the UK airspace for Gatwick and other airports in the UK. But Gatwick controls the airspace up to 4,000 feet. NATS take over when planes enter the UK airspace. So ATM, aircraft, air traffic movements. Gatwick has about approximately 56 an hour. They would like a lot more, and they did reach over 60 at one point. There are no limits to the number of flights per day, per hour at Gatwick. The only limit is the number of planes that can safely be operated by air traffic control from one runway. Tonight, there are restrictions in place. These are down to the Department of Transport, DFT. The night period is 11:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. with shoulder periods either side of these times. In the winter, the schedule is 3,250 flights. In the summer, it is 11,200 aircraft movements that are permitted by the DFT and are set in policy. Something to note is that the DFT are due to conduct yet another consultation on night flights next year. There are no restrictions currently on what time Gatwick fly at night and if there are arrivals or departures. Other airports have different agreements of night procedures. This gives you an idea of terrain. This is a consideration that is something that is taken on board, and the height of the plane is judged from sea level. So here we move to noise monitors. Now, there are noise monitors based around Gatwick Airport to monitor noise. These are located in consultation with Gatwick Noise Monitoring Group. So GNMG and the Noise Track Monitoring Advisory Group, so NATMAG. Both groups decide where Gatwick could geographically place these noise monitors around the airport so that as many communities as possible are covered by this scheme. You can ask your local elected member or your parish council to request a noise monitor in your area. Sound is measured by decibels, so that's a D and a big B. And LEQ is the equivalent of sound levels of aircraft noise in decibels, often called equivalent continuous sound level. Noise, so an N45 at night or an N65 during the day, is noise events. That is a new noise metric, but it's not one that is obligatory to be taken into account. You can complain to Gatwick Airport about aircraft noise, and this is done via their website. You can also track planes and monitor planes through their website, both historically and currently. There is a slight time delay on their system. So the Civil Aviation Authority, the CAA, produce noise contours every year of Gatwick, and I've chosen 2019 because Gatwick is using 2019 as a bit of a baseline. 2019 was one of the busiest Gatwick had. So noise contours are based on the UK Civil Aircraft Noise Contour Model. And I'm going to flick through a couple of examples of the noise contour maps taken from 2019. So it gives you an idea of how the land lies. And if I just use my mouse here, I can show you, this is the 54 decibel noise contour. This is the 57. Obviously, they get louder as they go close to the airport. 60, 63, 66, 69. So it gives you an idea. And just to give you some landmarks, there's Capel here, there's Kingsfold there, Rusper there. Obviously, this is Crawley. We've got Hawley up there. We've got Lingfield here, Dorman's Land here, Smallfield here, Burstow. So you can see they go out in very much sort of a longish squash sausage, if you like. That gives you an idea of them. And as I say, you can see all this through the Civil Aviation Noise Contour reports. The average summer noise is done on an average, so it's 16-hour day, and at night it is an 8-hour LEQ noise contour. Noise is measured in averages. Although we don't hear noise as an average, they are measured in an average, which is one of the reasons why we now have N65 and N45 at night, is because we've argued that people hear noise as a noise event. The summer actual day is split, you can see there. So most of the time you have you have departures to the west, which is this side, and you have arrivals in the east. And you can see here the noise contours, and they will change as the wind changes, and they will change subject to the mode of flight. So they'll change when this is departures this side, and this is arrivals this side, and the same. So it will change when we've got departures going this side and we've got arrivals going this side. So summer night departures, again, this shows you, these are departure routes only. This doesn't show arrivals, this shows departure routes only. So just give you some landmarks. There's Smallfield there, East Grinstead here, Horsham, Rudgwick there, North Homewood up there, Charwood Newdigate here, and Hawley. So Gatwick and aviation generally are saying planes are getting quieter with the operation of Airbus A320neos and A321neos. And also because they reduce noise by 3 to 5 decibels. 3 to 5 decibels, the reduction is not really heard by the naked ear, but that is the reduction that these new series of aircraft produce. And bear in mind that EasyJet fly 2/3 of Gatwick's business, and they use the Neo planes. We also have Boeing's, the 737s are coming back, 737 MAX is coming back, Emirates A380, and then obviously we have older planes. And again, these are, to give you an idea, these are the departure routes. These departure routes used to be called by a name. So this used to be called a Wizard. And this was called Bognor. They changed them, I think it was about 2014, they changed them into numbers. So you now have Route 6, Route 3, Route 4, Route 1, Route 7, Route 8, and so on. So that was a major change. And so sometimes you'll still see them referred to by aviation in their name, or you'll see them referred to in their number. If it's coming out of Gatwick now, they tend to be referred to in their number. But that's why some documents refer to them as names. And then obviously you have different directions. So here's Gatwick here, and you'll have runway 26L, and then you'll have runway 08, and that depends whether it's an arrival or it's a departure operating either end of the runway. And also just looking at these figures, it gives you an idea of the usage of departures here. So Route 4 had 27% of the departures, and it was the same in 2018. We had a 1% increase here. It was the same on Route 1. You tend to get long haul going in this direction here for departures, and you get all the Europeans coming down here, and the same here. This route can't climb very well because it's under a lot of the holding stacks and the arrival sways going to the east of the airport. So that tends to stay down to about 5,000 feet, that departure route. These departure routes here can climb because they're not captured under other airspace. These routes are a bit restricted because you've got Heathrow and you've got arrivals coming down here. You've got the Midhurst Gate over here for Heathrow, and you've also got Farnborough over here. Obviously Farnborough sits below Gatwick, but it's mostly Heathrow and the arrivals coming down the west side of the country. that restricts these departure routes from climbing. And to be quite honest, Route 3 tends to go more like this because it's European flights, trying to get to Europe the quickest route. So moving on, let me just go back a slide, because one thing I wanted to say to you is that to confuse everybody, this is the West, but when you have arrivals coming to the West, they're called easterlies. And when you have arrivals coming to the East, they're called westerlies, just to confuse you more. And the ILS, the Instrument Landing System, is the final approach. There's a beam that comes out from the runway, which aircraft latch onto, and that takes them in. That's how planes can now fly and land in fog, etc., is because the Instrument Landing System latches into the instruments in the aircraft and they bring them in safely to Gatwick. Now, these are noise preferential routes. These are what we currently know on departures. And if I just flick back to that previous one, you'll see these very narrow lines. And then I flick to these are noise preferential routes. These have been in place since the 1960s. And they were put in place to enable people to know where departing planes would fly. So if they bought a house that wasn't under a noise preferential route, say here, they knew they wouldn't have departing planes going over them. Now, they are restricted. They have a 3,000 to 4,000 feet climb. So once a plane has climbed to, this one is a 4,000 feet. Once they've climbed to 4,000 feet, they could actually vector. They could ask air traffic control if they can vector. And that's why you see sometimes departures like this, lots of lines, is because once they reach a certain height, they can actually vector off to a more direct route to their European destination. And sometimes you'll hear these called SIDS, and that's a standard instrument departure. So if I just flick forward, I can explain a little bit more about the changes. So you'll see here that that's quite a wide corridor. So historically, we've had planes flying to this edge, down the middle, to this edge. That's because we had ground-based beacons. Planes now operate on sat-nav. So like your car, I want to go on the M1, so I just go straight. That's the change. Whereas we had dispersal, because these ground-based beacons, planes used to be within this noise preferential route, the same on Route 4, all these departure routes. Now we have a line. So this is now, and that's what we had. And that's the fundamental change that was introduced in 2014, but I'll come on to that. So again, in 2014, Gatwick introduced something called precision-based navigation, so PBN, having undertaken a CAA, so that's the Civil Aviation Authority, CAP 725. These are documents that the Civil Aviation Authority produce. CAP 725 was a consultation that very few people knew about, and that was to put in these concentrated routes on departures. And it wasn't just at Gatwick, but Gatwick was the first to introduce them in 2014. And then the CA conducted a review of the implementation of this performance-based navigation, PBN, in a PIR review. And the CAA found that Route 4 was actually going outside the noise preferential route. So if I flip back, so it was going outside this noise preferential route, because the CAA had told Gatwick to put the routes down the centre of the noise preferential route. So put your concentrated route down the centre of this noise preferential route. That's what they were told. But with Route 4, they were going outside. And also Route 2, there was an issue. They were going further out. So these two routes had problems. Route 3 had a little problem, but it wasn't a major problem, and all the other routes conformed. So that was what the review came. But of course, what happened was, with the introduction of performance-based navigation, there was a lot of people that got very cross because they weren't aware of the consultation and they weren't aware of what concentrated routes meant to them. So if we go back, you may have got one plane every other hour if you lived here. You might have got one plane every other hour if you lived there. You might have got one plane every other hour and you lived there. Now you've got them all. Every single plane was on that exact line. So it was motorways. Instead of having lots of country lanes, they put in one big motorway or two big motorways or three big motorways. And so they go on. And so that's precision-based navigation. So each plane will fly exactly the same route. There can be slight deviation because the larger the plane will fly slightly different routes. But more or less, they will all fly down the centre line of what was the noise preferential routes. And noise preferential routes haven't disappeared yet, but aviation and Gatwick would love them to disappear because they want to put in more departure routes, and I'll come on to that. Route 4 faced a legal challenge over this, and so that's why there is currently a separate new consultation by the Civil Aviation Authority that Gatwick is going through, because there was a gentleman here that challenged them that the route wasn't flying as it used to, and basically a review of a judicial review basically just questions what has happened, and it was found to be flawed, and so now Gatwick's just conducting it again. It's as simple as that, and they will come up with the results of that. The consultation that was 725 was found not fit for purpose, and so we now have 7 stages of CAP 1616. It's a more complex process and it's more lengthy and costly for aviation if they want to do an airspace change. But it ticks the boxes and it actually actively prevents a judicial review, unfortunately. But as I say, it's only process. It's not actually stopping the route from changing. So we move on. So that wasn't the only thing that happened in 2014. In 2014, Gatwick trialled a route called Abner. This was a departure route that flew over areas that had never been flown over before. It was kept a secret and caused a lot of anger from residents that were newly overflown by it. And Gatwick undertook a study, but not of the environmental impact this had on flying over new residents. They did a study of the separation between these two departure routes. So this is Route 1. And they did a study of a 20-degree separation, whether it was safe to do that. And this carried on for 6 months. And as I say, it caused a lot of anger. And unfortunately, local authorities and Gatcom and the noise group sits on Gatcom all knew about it, but they were told to keep it secret. Well, the reaction from residents certainly told Gatwick they were not happy about it. So that was one of the changes in 2014. And this was all part of this, which was called LAMP, London Airspace Management Programme, and it was to make changes in airspace, which was really not well received at all. And ADNID, the trial route, appeared as disguises of 3 routes over new areas. It also appeared as a new flight path off Gatwick's then 2nd runway, which is now a 3rd runway. So arrivals in 2014, this also changed. So this is to the east, which, oh, sorry about that. So this is to the east and they're called westerlies, and this is to the west and they're called easterlies. This is the final approach, which is the instrument landing system. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know why that keeps doing that. Right, so these are heat maps. So obviously the hotter the colour, the more planes are in there. And that's how arrivals operate. They operate in a swathe. So anywhere within this area, arrivals can fly, and they join stars on the final approach. So they can be 8, 10, 12, 14, or they come directly in. And that in 2014 changed. So arrivals went further out. So they joined at 10, 12, 14 and straight in. And it narrowed the swathe. Now, the reason that oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. The reason that this NATS and CA agreed to do this was because by joining further out, they could reduce the speed and planes would fly in a very low gear, low engine, so very quiet. The further they joined, the quieter they were because the pilots had more distance to go. But of course, that caused problems because you narrowed the swathe and people started thinking they had concentrated flight paths of arrivals over them. So another illegal challenge was brought by a Kent resident, and that moved planes back to joining at 8 nautical miles further in. So you went 8, 10, 12, 14 and straight in again. And that still is how they fly today, and they still fly in this swathe. You haven't got concentration on arrivals yet, and I'll come on to that. And one of the other reasons was to reduce the number of go-rounds. Now, go-rounds is when the runway is busy, and so an arriving plane will have to literally go around, abort a landing and go round. But most of the time it's also because planes are coming in too fast, they've got too much speed on. You've got a foreign pilot who doesn't know the runway, hasn't got off the runway, and also weather causes go-arounds as well. And obviously for a go-around it causes a lot of noise because they quickly have to take off, put the power back on to come back around to try and land again. And sometimes it's pilot error. It's literally just that. So this is quite a good map because it shows you the arrival swathes. This is 2019, so we're using that as a baseline because Gatwick's using that as a baseline. This is when they were at their busiest, and it was also when they had the most complaints as well. So just pick out this Rudwick here, Padstow, Slingfold, Itchingfield, Mannings Heath, Hancross, Crowborough. Over to the east side, you've got Crowborough, Tunbridge Wells, Tunbridge, Chiddingstone, Edenbridge, Dormansland, Forest. Now these circles here, one's called Willow and one's called Timber, and they're holding stacks. And the lowest they can do on a holding stack is 7,000 feet. So a plane will be coming in from Europe and it may join the holding stack, or it will just go round and it will either join at 8, 10, 12, 14 or straight in. And the same to the east. Now, as I say, easterlies get about 70% of arrivals, and this side obviously gets 30%. This side has the same departure route for 7 and 8 and 1 as their arrivals. To the east, you don't have that. The departure route actually goes between Tunbridge and Tunbridge Wells, and it can climb. And then the other departure goes up here towards Seven Oaks. And then obviously you have this one that goes down over Copthorne. So that goes down here. But as you can see, that's why it's kept low, is because it's below all this arrival traffic. The other thing is that Gatwick are doing continuous descent operations on arrivals. So that's CDO. And that is planes staying higher for longer. So they start their descent at 7,000 feet. Unfortunately, there's nothing to stop them from coming down quickly so that they are low going over Crowborough. They start their descent at 7,000 feet and then they descend, and they can descend quickly. And that's one of the issues, is that they're coming down over these areas very low. And when planes turn, which is called vectoring, they increase their noise. So let's move to the next slide. Ooh, noise shadows. Now, noise shadow is something that the Civil Aviation Authority call a noise cone. And noise cones are recognised by the CAA, but they don't have to be included. And this is one of the things that has come out of PBN, so performance-based navigation, concentrated flight paths, is that somebody will think they are being overflown when they live here because of the noise shadow that is projected by a concentrated route. So even though when you look at a map, you'll go, that line is not over my house, but that plane is flying over my house, that's because of the projected noise that can be 3 to 5 nautical miles either side of that line, of that flight path. And that is causing, obviously, residents a lot of problems. And it's subject, the cone is bigger the higher the plane. So that gives you an idea, and that operates on both arrivals and departures. And it's something that's recognised, but it's not taken into account when they're doing noise metrics, etc., or even planning new airspace. So this just gives you a typical sort of arrivals day. And you'll see you've got red, which is arrivals, and you've got blue departure routes. Now that's because subject to the wind direction, or if you've got a very still wind, they will switch the direction of the runway. But 70% of departures go to the west, and then arrivals coming to the east. So as you can see, you've got runway 08 and then you've got runway 26L. And as I said to you earlier, that's because of the operations. So this is on departures and this is on arrivals. This is on departures, this is on arrivals. So again, sent to confuse, but it switches to their reference. As you can see, the blue here is departures to the west. So that's routes 7 and 8. That's route 1, slightly going off. That's mostly sort of real internationals. Here you see route 4. It's not managing to stay to one single route. It's actually fanning out. Route 3 here, and then you've got this route going down here, which is route 2. You've got route 5. As you can see, this is the ILS in the east, and that's the departure. They both aren't the same. They're not the same, whereas here the arrival ILS is the same in the west as it is for the departure routes. All right, so I'm looking to the future now, and I said it would be in 2 halves. Now, phases. This is a future airspace strategy implementation south. This is something the government signed up to. It's the modernisation of airspace. It's not working today, is it? Sorry about that. Gatwick has obviously signed up to this as part of the government. The government can enforce them to sign up to this. And Gatwick have based their phases proposals, their airspace requirements, on a 2-runway airport. So I'll leave you to read that part, but whilst you're reading that, I'll read something from the government's website. The UK airspace is complex, with its design dating back to the 1950s for aircraft. The need for modernisation has to be recognised by the UK government, who's tasked the Civil Aviation Authority, the CAA, to coordinate how it happens. The CAA Airspace Modernisation Strategy set out the initiatives that UK industry will deliver to achieve the government's policies. NAT's air traffic control and design has a central role to play, as does the government, airports, airlines, and many others who use our airspace. Modernising airspace, which means both route design and new tools and technology, will make air traffic management more efficient, help reduce the impact of air traffic has on local communities and the environment, and supporting future growth. CAGNE has yet to see any evidence of any noise reduction with FASs, only greater numbers of planes in the sky flying over new areas to allow for efficiency of the airspace to benefit aviation growth. Any CO2 saving is lost with more planes. Flying on fossil fuel and other greenhouse gases are not yet accounted for by aviation. The initiative in which government is playing a significant role, which will change the architecture of airspace design across the southeast of England, is FASs. The DfT has asked NATS to lead on the redesigning of airspace above 7,000 feet, and all airports affected, including Gatwick, to lead their own airspace changes below 7,000 feet. All changes will be overseen by the CAA and follow the airspace change process set out in CAP 1616. So it sounds good in theory, but as we say, what we've seen so far, it's not looking very good for those on the ground. Now, this just gives you an idea. This is the West. Now, these are maps that have been part of the consultation to date. The public will not be consulted until 2024. And Gatwick have produced design principles, and CAGNE's been party to that and have argued all the way. But as you can see here, these are departures. Now, this route here, it sort of resembles a little bit of 7 and 8, but it doesn't really. This route sort of resembles Route 1, and this route sort of resembles Route 4. All the others, you can see that, including the Abner trial, which is this blue line here, are all new departure routes. And over here, Gatwick are seeking to move the arrivals to 5 to 6 nautical miles. If you remember, I said arrivals join at 8 nautical miles currently. Gatwick are now seeking to bring them in 5 to 6 nautical miles, which means they will be flying over many new areas, and they're going to introduce concentrated routes, concentrated arrival routes. So that's to the west, and then to the east that's Tunbridge Wells, Crowborough, Sevenoaks, Westerham, Oxford. These are arrivals. Again, they're looking to bring them in at 5 to 6 nautical miles, whereas currently they come in at 8 nautical miles. They come in at 10 nautical miles at night, because the government did recognise that people close to the runway are significantly impacted with very low planes. So at night it's 10 nautical miles, daytime it's 8 nautical miles, but these are 5 to 6. So these are arrival concentrated routes, and as you'll see, there's new arrivals coming in from the north. That doesn't currently happen. And these are departures. Now that sort of resembles Route 3. That doesn't resemble Route 2 because it's a straight line normally. But as you can see, they're trying to get them to Europe. And then here, Route 5 is there. And then the other route that goes towards Sevenoaks is over here. But all these others are new routes on departures in the east. One of the things they're going to try and do on departures is continuous climb operations, so CCO. But that doesn't come into play until a plane has reached 3,000 feet. And then that's the idea, is to get planes away up higher, quicker, so that areas further out aren't impacted by these changes to departures. Now, I wanted to touch on this. This is Gatwick Airport as we know it today. And Gatwick are pushing ahead for planning permission through planning development consent order, and that will be something that's going to be considered by PINS, which is the government's planning inspectorate, and then they will make a recommendation to the Secretary of State, which is Grant Shapps. Now, basically, this is the main runway as we know it today. This is the emergency runway, and this is the taxiway Juliet. And you can see that's North Terminal over there, and that's South Terminal over there. Now, this runway and this runway cannot be used currently together because they are too close. It is unsafe to do so. So when this main runway is closed, they use the emergency runway. The main runway closes for maintenance, and they use the emergency runway. For them to be able to use the main runway and the emergency runway together as a second runway, they have got to undertake major construction. They've got to move it 12 metres north, so over this Juliet taxiway. They've not only got to do that, they've got to build numerous taxiways. They've got to build numerous taxiways off this main runway. They have purchased land out here because they've got to go outside their boundary with new taxiways and bunds to stop the noise for Charwood over here. This runway will have departures, mostly European departures. This runway will take, oh goodness me, what's going on today? This runway will take arrivals and the bigger departures. So you'll have two runways running in unison, but don't be deceived by the current marketing. This is a major construction of a new runway, but this is a cheap way of Gatwick achieving a second runway and increasing the number of planes by over 50,000 a year. So currently you have, pre-COVID, you have 285,000 planes a year. That will go to just under 400,000 a year. So that's a significant increase, and all their documents say that noise will increase. So there is a consultation currently taking place on highways. There was a public consultation between September and December last year. Don't worry if you didn't know about it, it was a really poor consultation. But I think, to be clear, that this will have a significant impact, not only on the environment from over 1 million extra tonnes of carbon, but it will have a serious impact on residents with aircraft noise. Now, one of the things as part of this rebuilding of the emergency runway as a second runway is that Gatwick's offering noise envelopes as a legally binding noise limit. Now, that is going to be based on noise contours. If you remember earlier, you saw various noise contours that shift according to the aircraft movements. These are only going to go to 45 decibels and 51 decibels. And Gatwick are basing that planes will get quieter. Well, as I said previously, EasyJet fly Neos, and they are 3 to 5 decibels quieter. If a plane drops its wheels and flaps close to the runway, that increases the noise by 3 to 5 decibels, just to give you an idea of how little that noise reduction is. And one of the issues is that the 3 to 5 decibel reduction that they say come with these modern planes is the frequency of the concentrated routes. So especially at night time, if you get woken, you then probably hear every plane after that. In the daytime, if you hear one plane, you will then notice with the frequency, because you get all the aircraft there, you don't get dispersal. So Gatwick are looking to progress these noise envelopes as a legally binding factor, so that you can be assured of what noise you will have to endure with a second runway. But if I just flick you back to this, Gatwick are in unison consulting on this. So this doesn't reflect this. And bearing in mind that FAS's modernisation of airspace is based on a 2-runway airport, they are ignoring all these new flight paths that they are putting in their design principles as a way forward, because they're saying with a second runway, there'll be no new flight paths. So the noise envelopes can be changed. So you won't be consulted on FASs till 2024, and yet Gatwick is endeavouring to push ahead, consult as quickly as it can to get through this DCO, to get it into the Government Planning Inspectorate, to try and get permission for 2 runways on the understanding you'll have these noise envelopes, which will be legally binding. But at the same time, they're consulting on the modernisation of airspace. So it just doesn't really marry up too well. But you can be assured of that. So I think I've sort of mostly covered everything. There was obviously quite a lot there to take in. One of the key things is to participate in these consultations, and is to be aware of the issues that is coming. So obviously currently we have a lot of people who are unhappy with the aircraft noise pre-COVID, and now people are starting to wake up to the aircraft noise returning. This presentation is not anti-aviation, it's not anti-Gatwick Airport. This is trying to empower residents to understand the complexity of airspace, to enable you to participate in these consultations, because it's really important that you do. So I'm going to go to my last slide, which is obviously about CAGNE, and I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording, and then ask for any questions and have a look in the chat. Let me just stop recording.